"Daddy, they look hungry." 5 whispered words from a 7-year-old girl were about to undo 8 months of suffocating silence, grief, and a deadly corporate deception one family had been drowning inside without ever knowing the truth. Chloe Vance whispered those words while tugging gently at the dark charcoal wool sleeve of her father's coat. Her small pointing finger directed his gaze across the crowded room of the Magnolia Oak Diner on Simpson Street in Atlanta, past the amber glass pendant lamps and the rising steam of freshly brewed chicory coffee, straight toward a cramped vinyl booth tucked in the corner by the kitchen doors. A woman sat there with a little girl who looked no older than 6. 2 tall glasses of plain tap water sat on the table. No steaming plates, no hot coffee. A single laminated breakfast menu lay closed and untouched between them, as though opening it might make the emptiness of their pockets official. Donovan Vance's first parental instinct was to tell his daughter not to point at strangers. His second instinct, born from 44 years of surviving the harshest streets before building an empire, was to actually look. If a story about a whispered secret, an unyielding mother's pride, and a billionaire confronting the truth behind his late wife's death speaks to something deep inside you, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what Chloe noticed on that freezing Saturday morning was only the beginning of a truth that would change everything. The silence was about to break. It was a gray, biting 42-degree morning at the Magnolia Oak Diner, the kind of morning that ordinary people in Atlanta took for granted as they rushed through their weekend routines. For Maya Holloway, however, sitting inside that warm room was a calculated act of maternal survival. She had just completed an exhausting 8-hour overnight shift in the basement prep kitchen of the Peachtree Plaza Hotel, where she hauled 40-pound crates of frozen poultry and scrubbed grease-caked industrial ovens for $14.85 an hour. Her cloth tote bag rested heavily against her worn work boots, holding exactly $7.35 in crumpled paper bills and loose change to cover 4 remaining days of groceries and bus fares. Poverty leaves no room for error. Maya sat tall in the red vinyl booth, her dark skin tight over her high cheekbones, and her eyes carrying the bone-deep weariness of a mother working 54 hours a week across 2 jobs. Across from her, 6-year-old Brianna was tracing words in a second-grade reading workbook, her stomach letting out a faint, hollow rumble that Maya felt like a physical blow against her own chest. Maya reached into her coat pocket and placed a dry crust of whole wheat bread on a folded napkin, smiling softly as she pushed it toward her daughter. She told her child that she had already eaten a massive hot breakfast before leaving the hotel kitchen. It was a holy lie. "You finish every bite of that bread, Brianna," Maya murmured softly, her fingers gently smoothing down the edge of her daughter's woolen beanie. "We're going to sit here until the frost clears, and then we'll walk the 3 blocks to your school library." Brianna chewed the dry bread slowly, cutting it into tiny, deliberate pieces, as if trying to make the meager breakfast last as long as possible. The child's eyes drifted toward the neighboring tables, watching platters of golden waffles, sizzling applewood smoked bacon, and melted cheddar eggs pass through the narrow aisles. A person who is truly starving watches food not with greed, but with the quiet, resigned longing of someone who has learned to accept that warmth belongs to everyone else. Maya watched her daughter's eyes and felt her throat tighten with suppressed tears. She forced herself to remain still. Just 20 feet away, seated in a spacious booth along the front picture window, Donovan Vance sat in complete contrast to the quiet struggle unfolding near the kitchen. He was a self-made black billionaire whose holding company, Vance Global Group, managed more than $840 million in major infrastructure projects across the southeastern United States. His tailored charcoal wool overcoat and custom Italian leather shoes spoke of immense power, yet the hollow expression in his eyes revealed a man who was utterly broken inside. Exactly 8 months and 14 days earlier, his brilliant wife, Althea Vance, had died in a violent, unexplained car crash along a deserted stretch of Interstate 85. The pain had never faded. Althea had been the chief financial officer of their company, a forensic accountant of uncompromising integrity who had built their empire alongside him with fierce intelligence and grace. The official police investigation had closed the case within 48 hours, ruling her fatal collision an accident caused by driver fatigue during a late-night storm. Donovan had never accepted that convenient explanation, spending 8 sleepless months obsessing over her final phone calls and the sudden, terrifying secrecy that had consumed her in the weeks before she died. He had brought Chloe to this modest diner today, only because Althea used to bring their daughter here every Saturday morning before the world shattered. Grief is an unyielding shadow. Their table was covered with an extravagant breakfast spread that Donovan had ordered without looking at the prices. A towering stack of pecan waffles, drizzled with pure maple syrup, scrambled farm eggs, crispy sausage links, and a porcelain bowl overflowing with fresh blackberries and sliced strawberries. Chloe had picked up her fork, but her attention had immediately shifted away from the feast in front of her. She watched the woman in the faded canvas jacket discreet her hands under the table, rubbing her cracked, chalky knuckles, while her little girl carefully divided a single crust of dry bread. The stark difference between their abundance and the other table's complete lack was something even a child could understand. Chloe pulled on her father's arm again. "Daddy, look at her plate," Chloe whispered once more, her voice trembling with the pure, uncorrupted empathy that children possess before the world teaches them to look away. "She's only eating bread, and the lady doesn't have anything at all. Can we give them some of our waffles?" Donovan looked up from his cold coffee, his eyes following his daughter's gaze across the bustling dining room. For the first time that morning, he truly saw the woman sitting in the corner booth. He noticed the stiff, defensive posture of her shoulders, the immaculate neatness of her daughter's worn clothes, and the way the woman reached into her purse to count out 3 small quarters to leave on the laminate table for the water glasses. It was the posture of someone who would rather starve than beg. It was a dignity he recognized instantly. 30 years earlier, Donovan had watched his own mother scrub office floors on Peachtree Street, until her fingers bled, skipping meals for days at a time so that he could have new school shoes. He remembered the specific, burning shame of sitting in diners while his mother ordered hot water with lemon and pretended she was fasting for church. The memory struck him with such overwhelming force that the air seemed to leave his lungs. He looked down at Chloe's earnest, pleading face, and then back at the woman across the room. He knew what he had to do. Donovan stood up from the window booth, buttoning his coat with slow, deliberate precision as he picked up a clean side plate from their table. He walked across the polished linoleum floor, his heavy footsteps cutting through the hum of diner chatter and clinking silverware. Maya noticed the tall shadow crossing her table and looked up instantly, her spine straightening with instinctive wariness as she pulled Brianna slightly closer to her side. Donovan stopped 2 paces away, holding his hands open in a posture of complete respect. A fateful encounter had begun. "Excuse me, ma'am." Donovan spoke in a low, resonant voice that carried neither condescension nor pity. "My daughter Chloe noticed your daughter working so hard on her reading book this morning, and she insisted that we share our breakfast order before the kitchen stops serving the morning specials." Maya's jaw tightened, her pride rising up like an impenetrable stone wall that had kept her alive through years of hardship. She looked from Donovan's expensive wool coat to his solemn, respectful eyes, immediately preparing to decline the offer with the practiced politeness she used to protect her self-respect. She was a woman who worked 2 jobs to pay her own way, not a charity case waiting for handouts from wealthy patrons in business suits. She opened her mouth to refuse. "Thank you, sir, but we are perfectly fine," Maya said clearly, her voice steady and firm. "We were just finishing our study time before walking over to the school." "Please, ma'am, it's not charity," Donovan replied gently, using the exact words his own mother had once needed to hear from strangers in moments of desperation. "It's just breakfast between neighbors. My daughter ordered far more waffles and fruit than we could ever finish, and it would truly honor us if you and your little girl would let us share it with you." Brianna looked up at her mother with wide, questioning eyes, holding her breath as she waited for permission. Maya looked back at Donovan, seeing the genuine sincerity and deep sorrow reflected in the man's eyes, realizing that this gesture was not about showing off wealth, but about fulfilling a child's simple wish to do good. With a soft, barely perceptible sigh, Maya nodded her head. The wall of pride yielded to grace. Donovan smiled warmly, signaling Miss Bernice to bring 2 full breakfast platters of waffles, eggs, sausage, and orange juice directly to Maya's table. Maya watched in quiet gratitude as Brianna's face lit up with pure joy, the little girl carefully spreading butter over the warm waffles with the reverence of someone receiving a precious gift. Donovan returned to his booth by the window, watching from a distance as the 2 girls exchanged shy, sweet smiles across the dining room. 10 minutes later, Miss Bernice walked over to Maya's table with the final bill, setting it down with a friendly wink. The gentleman by the window took care of everything on his business account, sugar, the waitress whispered before moving back to the kitchen. Maya picked up the printed receipt, intending to note the exact amount so she could one day repay the kindness when her financial situation stabilized. Her eyes scanned down past the itemized list of waffles just until they landed on the bold, computerized text at the bottom of the slip. Billed to corporate account. Donovan Vance, CEO, Vance Global Group. Maya went completely terrifyingly still, the breath caught in her throat like jagged glass. Maya's hands began to shake violently as the paper receipt trembled between her chalky fingers. She hadn't heard or spoken that surname aloud in 8 long months, not since a terrifying rainy night when a panicked woman had walked into this very diner holding a leather notebook. Maya looked up across the room, staring directly into Donovan Vance's sorrowful eyes. She knew exactly who he was. "Are you?" Maya's voice came out as a ragged, breathless whisper across the quiet space between them. "Are you Althea Vance's husband?" The entire diner seemed to dissolve into absolute silence the moment those words left Maya's lips. The clinking of forks against porcelain, the low hum of conversation from the counter stools, and the hiss of pancake batter on the griddle faded into nothing. Donovan Vance froze with his coat halfway zipped, his eyes widening in complete and utter disbelief as the name of his dead wife echoed through the small restaurant. He stood completely motionless, staring at the woman in the faded canvas jacket, as if she were a ghost emerging from the deepest shadows of his memory. The name felt like a thunderclap inside his chest. Chloe looked up from her sketchbook, sensing the sudden sharp shift in the room's atmosphere, even if she could not understand the heavy history behind it. Donovan stepped forward slowly, his heavy dress shoes making no sound against the worn linoleum, as he closed the distance between their tables. He stopped at the edge of Maya's booth, his hands gripping the laminate tabletop with white-knuckled intensity, while his gaze searched her face for any trace of deceit or recognition. His voice dropped to a low, trembling register that barely carried past their shoulders. "How do you know my wife's name?" Donovan asked, his dark eyes burning with 8 months of unhealed agony, confusion, and suspicion. Althea never gave interviews to the press, and her private office was 40 floors above the city streets. "Who told you to say that name to me this morning?" Maya did not flinch beneath his imposing presence, though her pulse raced violently against her ribs. She placed her right hand flat over Brianna's small fingers, drawing strength from the innocent warmth of her child as she prepared to unseal a secret she had carried in total isolation for 257 days. She looked directly into Donovan's guarded eyes, seeing not the billionaire power broker celebrated in financial magazines, but a shattered widower desperately searching for an anchor in an ocean of grief. She knew the truth had to be spoken with utmost care. "I didn't hear it on the news, Mr. Vance," Maya replied, her voice steady and rich with quiet solemnity. "I know her name because 8 months ago, on a rainy Thursday night around 10:47 p.m., Althea Vance sat in this exact corner booth where my daughter and I are sitting right now. She was completely alone, soaked to the bone, and terrified out of her mind." Donovan felt the air leave his lungs in a sharp, painful gasp, the blood draining from his face until his dark skin looked ashen under the warm diner lights. That specific date had been burned into his memory like a cattle brand. It was the night before Althea's car was found mangled on the shoulder of Interstate 85, a night when she had called him at 10:15 p.m. claiming she was working late at the corporate headquarters on financial audits. She had lied to him about where she was going. The deception cut him deeper than any knife. What was she doing here? Donovan whispered, pulling out the opposite vinyl seat and sitting down slowly, his broad shoulders collapsing under the sudden weight of the revelation. "Why would my wife come all the way to a diner in West End when our home was in Buckhead?" "She wasn't looking for a meal, sir," Maya explained softly, leaning closer across the table, so their voices remained strictly between them. "I was working the night maintenance and closing shift here back then, scrubbing the grease traps and mopping the back storage room after midnight. Your wife came in through the back kitchen entrance, carrying a heavy leather briefcase and an umbrella that had been turned inside out by the storm. She was shaking so badly she could barely hold a pen, constantly looking out the window toward every pair of headlights that passed by Simpson Street." Donovan closed his eyes, visualizing Althea's delicate features contorted in fear, trying to comprehend what could possibly drive a woman of her immense stature and composure to hide in the kitchen corner of an unfamiliar diner in the middle of a torrential downpour. He remembered how distant she had become during those final 3 weeks, how she had locked herself in her study, with stacks of paper spreadsheets, refusing to answer his questions, and insisting she was just handling a complicated quarterly filing. He had trusted her silence because he loved her. That trust now felt like a tragic failure. She asked to speak with someone who wasn't connected to the corporate towers downtown, Maya continued, her memory sharp and unyielding as she recounted the smallest details of that fateful encounter. She saw me folding the clean tablecloths near the kitchen swinging doors and called me over by my name badge. She ordered 2 cups of hot water with lemon just to have something on the table, but she never took a single sip. She asked me if this diner had an employee locker that stayed locked overnight, and whether I was a person who believed in keeping a sacred promise to a stranger. "And what did you say to her?" Donovan asked, his voice cracking with an emotion he could no longer suppress in front of his own daughter. "I told her that my father was a Baptist deacon who taught me that integrity is the only thing a poor person owns that nobody can take away," Maya said firmly. "I told her that if she needed something kept safe from the rain, my locker was in the dry back hallway behind 3 reinforced steel doors." She looked at me for a long time, as if she were weighing my soul in the balance of her hands, and then she reached inside her leather coat. Maya paused, glancing down at Brianna, who had finished her waffles and was now quietly watching Chloe doodle a picture of 2 smiling girls on the back of a paper placemat. Maya reached into the deep, heavy interior pocket of her own canvas jacket, her fingers wrapping around a rectangular object wrapped inside a thick, weather-resistant plastic pouch that had been sealed with waterproof electrical tape. She had carried this weight with her every single day for 8 months, transferring it between her work bags, because she refused to leave something so precious in a fragile basement apartment. She pulled the package out into the dim morning light. Donovan's gaze fell upon the bundle, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Maya carefully pulled back the layers of black electrical tape, peeling away the thick plastic to reveal a vintage, hand-stitched brown leather notebook with a brass buckle clasp. Attached to the corner ring of the binder was a distinct, handcrafted full-grain leather keychain, stamped with the deep silhouette of an iron ship anchor. The edges of the leather were slightly darkened from years of handling, but the craftsmanship was unmistakable. Donovan choked back a dry sob. The anchor. Donovan breathed, his trembling hand reaching out to touch the leather keychain before stopping inches away, as if afraid the object might turn to smoke and vanish into the cold air. "I gave this to Althea on our 7th wedding anniversary during our trip to Savannah. She told me that an anchor was a reminder that no matter how violent the corporate storms became, our family would always stay grounded in the truth. She never went anywhere without it." "She handed this notebook to me that night at 11:14 p.m., Maya said, her eyes glistening with shared reverence for the sacred relic. "She told me that if anything happened to her on the highway, or if she didn't return to this diner within 48 hours to reclaim it, I was to guard it with my life until I could place it directly into the hands of Donovan Vance. She told me not to take it to the police, not to call the corporate office, and not to trust anyone who arrived in an expensive car claiming to represent your family. She said only Donovan would recognize the anchor." Donovan picked up the heavy leather notebook, feeling the familiar texture of the cowhide leather beneath his calloused fingertips. He opened the brass clasp with a soft metallic click that seemed to echo through the entire room, turning the first thick parchment page to reveal Althea's distinctive, elegant cursive handwriting penned in dark blue fountain ink. The very sight of her words, written in the precise, disciplined style of a master auditor, brought 8 months of unresolved sorrow rushing to the surface of his mind. The page began with a direct message to him. "Donovan, my love, if you are holding this journal, it means the darkness caught up with me before I could reach the safety of our home." Donovan's vision blurred with thick, heavy tears that dripped onto the dry parchment, staining the blue ink as he read the desperate opening lines. He remembered the last morning he had seen her alive, kissing her cheek while she adjusted her silver earrings in their marble foyer, entirely unaware that a deadly net was closing in around her life. He had been so consumed with negotiating a $45 million municipal transit bond that he had failed to see the terror lurking behind his wife's calm smile. The guilt was an agonizing, physical weight. "For 8 months, Donovan whispered, his hand shaking so violently that the pages fluttered in the quiet diner air. I have listened to corporate lawyers, police detectives, and insurance investigators tell me that Althea was simply exhausted from overwork. They told me that she drifted across the center lane because she fell asleep at the wheel after working 80-hour weeks. They made me believe my wife was reckless, that she threw her life away because she was overwhelmed by the pressure of our expansion. She wasn't reckless, Mr. Vance, Maya said softly, her voice full of fierce conviction. She was a warrior trying to shield her husband and daughter from a betrayal that was rotting your company from the inside out. When she spoke to me in that kitchen, she didn't sound like a woman who was giving up. She sounded like a general, making sure the ammunition was hidden before the enemy overran the perimeter. Donovan turned the second page of the notebook, noticing a slight thickness in the heavy cardboard backing of the rear leather cover. He ran his thumb along the inner lining, discovering a tiny, precise slit that had been cut into the binding with a razor blade and sealed with transparent cellophane. Tucked deep inside the hidden compartment was a black microSD memory card no larger than a child's fingernail, along with a handwritten index of bank account numbers and routing codes. The physical evidence had been preserved perfectly. Maya watched Donovan's expression transform from paralyzing sorrow into a cold, diamond-hard focus that revealed the formidable warrior who had conquered the business world. She recognized that look because she saw it in her own mirror every morning before heading out to work her double shifts. The absolute determination of a parent who will burn down the world to protect their child's honor. Donovan closed the leather journal with a decisive thud, holding the small memory card tightly inside his clenched fist as he looked across the table at Maya. A monumental shift had taken place. "You had this in your possession for 8 months, Donovan said slowly, his voice dropping into a tone of profound reverence. "You work 54 hours a week scrubbing floors and carrying crates, living on $7 and change while caring for your daughter. And yet you never tried to sell this information to the media or use it to demand a ransom from Vance Global Group. Why didn't you open it, Maya?" "Because it wasn't mine to open, Mr. Vance," Maya answered without a single second of hesitation, her head held high and her eyes blazing with absolute dignity. "A hungry stomach is a terrible burden to carry. But a compromised soul is something you can never clean. Your wife looked into my eyes and trusted me with the only thing she had left to protect her family. I would have died before I let someone buy that trust from me for a handful of dirty money." Donovan looked at Maya, seeing the profound greatness of character that poverty could never diminish. He realized in that instant that this encounter was not a random coincidence of a Saturday morning, but the culmination of a sacred trust that had survived against all odds. Outside the diner window, the freezing rain had finally stopped, allowing a sharp beam of winter sunlight to pierce through the gray clouds and illuminate the cracked table between them. The time for hiding was over. "Maya Holloway," Donovan said, his voice carrying the full, unyielding authority of an empire builder ready for war. "The debt I owe you today can never be measured in currency, but the fight that starts now is going to require everything we both have. Are you ready to see what Althea died trying to show us?" Donovan Vance stood up from the vinyl booth and walked directly to his private armored SUV parked at the curb, returning 90 seconds later with a secure executive laptop. He placed the heavy aluminum device on the laminate table, inserting the microSD card into the reader with steady, deliberate hands while shielding the screen from view. The system decrypted the encrypted partitions within 12 seconds, displaying thousands of indexed forensic accounting, spreadsheets, scanned bank transfers, and confidential wire slips. A massive corporate crime was laid bare. Maya watched his face harden into stone as columns of red numbers and signature authorizations scrolled across the high-resolution monitor. The documents revealed an intricate network of 87 offshore shell companies operating out of the Cayman Islands and Delaware, quietly siphoning a total of $31,428,600 from Vance Global Group's affordable housing development funds over a 22-month period. Every single illicit transfer had been routed just below the $50,000 federal audit threshold to avoid triggering automatic compliance flags. It was a masterpiece of insider theft. The most damning piece of evidence sat at the bottom of the master audit summary. Digital approval certificates bearing the cryptographic signature of Damon Vance, Donovan's first cousin and the executive vice president of the corporation. Damon had grown up on the same block in Bankhead, had stood as best man at Donovan and Althea's wedding, and had been the first person to arrive at the hospital on the night of the fatal crash. He had wept openly in Donovan's arms, swearing on his mother's grave that he would help protect the company while Donovan grieved his lost wife. The betrayal was absolute poison. Damon was the only person besides Althea and myself who possessed root administrative access to the escrow accounts, Donovan whispered, his knuckles turning white as he stared at his cousin's digital signature stamped across millions of stolen dollars. Althea discovered the embezzlement 3 weeks before she died, and when she refused to accept his bribes to alter the internal records, he realized she was preparing to take the evidence directly to the United States Department of Justice. She was murdered to keep this spreadsheet silent. Donovan sat in stunned silence for 2 full minutes, his breathing heavy and ragged as the reality of his cousin's treachery sank into his bones. He realized that for 8 long months, he had been welcoming his wife's killer into his family home for Sunday dinners, allowing the man to kiss Chloe on the forehead, while secretly looting the empire Althea had sacrificed her life to build. He felt a wave of nausea rise in his throat, followed by a profound burning gratitude toward the woman who had preserved the truth in the dark. He opened his leather briefcase with a sudden, decisive motion. He pulled out a gold fountain pen and a personalized executive checkbook, swiftly writing out a cash settlement check for $50,000 drawn on his private liquidity account. He slid the crisp paper across the table toward Maya, his eyes shining with desperate urgency as he urged her to take the money for her daughter's future. He wanted to solve her poverty in a single stroke of his pen. He thought money could balance the scales. "Take this, Maya," Donovan urged, pushing the check closer to her worn canvas sleeve. "You saved my family from living in a lie, and you held on to the evidence that will finally bring justice to Althea. It is $50,000 in cleared funds, and it is only the first installment of what Vance Global owes you for your loyalty." Maya looked down at the paper check, seeing more money written on a single slip than she had earned in 3 full years of scrubbing grease and sorting warehouse freight. For a fraction of a second, she visualized what $50,000 could do. An immediate exit from the moldy basement apartment on Oaks Street, warm winter coats for Brianna, a reliable used sedan, and healthy groceries without counting loose pennies at the checkout register. Yet as her gaze drifted back to Donovan's face, her spine straightened with unyielding resolve. Her dignity was not for sale. "Slide that check back into your briefcase, Mr. Vance," Maya said, her voice dropping into a calm, commanding tone that surprised even the billionaire sitting before her. "My father worked 40 years in the Atlanta rail yards with dirt under his fingernails and holes in his boots, but he never took a single dollar he didn't earn with his own sweat. I did not keep Althea's memory safe so I could collect a finder's fee from her grieving husband." Donovan paused, bewildered by the absolute rejection of life-changing wealth from a woman who had just counted 75 cents to pay for tap water. He had spent his entire career in boardrooms where men in $3,000 suits begged, lied, and compromised their integrity for a fraction of that amount. He looked at Maya's worn hands, her clean but frayed collar, and the quiet pride burning behind her steady gaze. He realized he had insulted her. "I apologize, Maya," Donovan said softly, slowly pulling the check back and tearing it into 4 clean pieces before laying them on the napkin. "I forgot for a moment that the most valuable things in this world can never be bought with a corporate check. Please forgive my arrogance." "I don't need your charity, Mr. Vance, but I do need you to look at line 47 on that spreadsheet," Maya replied, turning the laptop screen slightly with her index finger. Donovan's eyes followed her finger, his eyebrows furrowing as Maya began pointing out specific inconsistencies within the accounting ledger that even his senior external auditors had missed. Before her life had been derailed by medical debt and single motherhood, Maya had earned a bachelor's degree in archival library science and corporate records management, spending 5 years organizing municipal tax archives and complex auditing trails. She pointed out that Damon had not acted alone. The offshore shell accounts were routing secondary fee payments to a compliance firm based in Buckhead owned by the lead detective, who had closed Althea's accident investigation in less than 2 days. Her analytical mind was razor sharp. "The wire routing on line 47 doesn't match standard commercial escrow transfers," Maya explained with cool professional precision. "It's structured as an archival dummy ledger, meaning the real transaction logs are hidden inside an off-site physical backup server that requires manual reconciliation against paper bills of lading. If you only take this digital drive to the federal prosecutors, Damon's defense attorneys will claim the digital files were fabricated after Althea's death. You need the original physical paper audit trails to make the indictment completely airtight. Donovan stared at Maya in utter astonishment, recognizing instantly that sitting in front of him was not merely a resilient mother, but a brilliant, highly trained archival specialist whose talents had been buried beneath the crushing weight of low-wage manual labor. He closed the laptop screen halfway, his respect for her transforming from gratitude into profound professional admiration. He leaned forward across the table, changing his entire posture. A real opportunity was taking shape. My corporate headquarters has an independent special investigation unit operating under direct board oversight, Donovan said, his voice measured and authoritative. We are launching a comprehensive forensic audit to seize every paper document and backup drive from our regional offices before Damon realizes the net is closing in around him. I don't need an employee who works for a paycheck. I need an uncompromised archival analyst who knows how to spot every hidden paper trail without selling out to corporate pressure. Maya looked into Donovan's eyes, listening to the offer with careful, guarded calculation. She did not want a handout, but an honest, high-stakes position where her education and intellect would be utilized to achieve justice was something entirely different. It was an arena where she could fight on equal footing. She wanted to stand on her own feet. What are the terms of this position, Mr. Maya asked, her voice steady and businesslike. A 6-month independent consulting contract as Senior Archival Control Specialist for Vance Global Group, Donovan answered without hesitation. Your starting compensation will be $42.50 per hour, with full health coverage for you and Brianna, paid bi-weekly through our third-party fiduciary trust, so Damon cannot see your name on the internal payroll. You will work directly with my private legal counsel in a secure off-site office in Midtown. You will earn every single cent through your own labor. Maya felt a profound sense of release wash through her spirit, knowing that this offer represented the exact bridge her family needed to cross from desperation to permanent stability. She looked down at Brianna, who was leaning against her side with a peaceful full belly, and then reached across the table to extend her right hand. Donovan took her hand in a firm, respectful grip that sealed a professional pact between two equals. The foundation had been laid. I accept your offer, Mr. Vance, Maya said, her voice filled with quiet strength. I will report to your Midtown office on Monday morning at 7 a.m. sharp, and I will find every piece of paper Damon Vance tried to bury. Donovan nodded with deep satisfaction, handing her an encrypted corporate keycard and a private phone registered under an untraceable commercial account. He stood up from the table, signaling Chloe that it was time to leave for the morning. Chloe walked over to Brianna, handing her the drawing of the two smiling girls with the words, "Best Friends," scrawled across the top in purple crayon. Brianna beamed with happiness, clutching the paper like a gold medal. "We will see you Monday morning, Miss Holloway," Donovan said, tipping his head with profound respect before leading Chloe out into the bright winter morning. Maya sat in the booth for 5 more minutes, holding Brianna close while looking at the encrypted keycard, resting on the table before her. For the first time in 4 years, the crushing weight of survival had lifted, replaced by the clean, sharp fire of a woman stepping back into her rightful power. She stood up, took her daughter's hand, and walked out of the diner into a future that was finally hers to claim. The real work was about to begin. On Monday morning at precisely 6:42 a.m., Maya Holloway stepped out of the Midtown MARTA station onto the polished concrete of Peachtree Street. She wore a navy blue wool skirt suit purchased for $35 from a thrift boutique on Cascade Road, paired with modest black leather pumps that she had polished by hand the night before. Brianna was safely settled in an accredited before-school enrichment program funded directly through Maya's new corporate benefits package. Maya walked with her head held high, clutching her worn leather messenger bag as she approached the soaring glass facade of the Vance Global Tower. She was stepping onto a battlefield. She scanned her encrypted keycard at the private executive entrance, taking a service elevator up to the 32nd floor, where Donovan had established an off-site forensic annex isolated from the main corporate network. The office was stark and utilitarian, lined with 4 dozen steel filing cabinets containing 7 years of raw physical invoices, shipping manifests, and land acquisition escrow binders. Maya was introduced to a team of 6 senior financial analysts, all men in tailored Italian suits, who eyed her thrifted blazer and dark, unyielding posture with barely disguised skepticism. They assumed she was a temporary administrative assistant, hired through a diversity outreach quota. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Maya wasted no time on pleasantries or defensive explanations, pulling her hair back into a tight bun before diving directly into the dusty record storage containers. While the corporate analysts relied exclusively on automated computer scripts to scan digital summaries, Maya knew that digital logs could be altered with a few lines of malicious code. She spent 14 grueling hours each day, cross-referencing physical paper bills of lading against municipal property deed filings, recorded at the Fulton County Courthouse. Her fingertips grew rough and dry from handling thousands of abrasive carbon copy receipts, yet her focus never wavered for a single minute. She was hunting a killer. By the end of her second week, Maya had mapped out 42 distinct dummy subcontractors that existed only as post office boxes in Savannah and Macon. These entities had billed Vance Global Group for over $28 million in heavy excavation machinery and structural steel that had never been delivered to any actual job site. Every invoice bore an authorized signature stamp from Damon Vance, paired with an approval bypass override, created 24 hours after Althea's funeral. Maya meticulously documented every transaction in a thick, spiral-bound ledger, handwriting every invoice number, serial stamp, and bank routing sequence in dark, permanent ink. Her physical documentation was completely bulletproof. Damon Vance, however, was not an amateur who left loose ends unattended. As executive vice president, he received daily network security telemetry reports and quickly noticed that an unlisted user on the 32nd floor was pulling deep historical archives from before the accident. He began watching Maya through the building's closed-circuit security cameras, watching her leave the tower long after the other analysts had gone home. He recognized the methodical, uncompromising discipline in her movements, a discipline that felt terrifyingly identical to Althea's. He knew his time was running out. On a rainy Thursday evening at 8:15 p.m., Maya packed her spiral notebook into her leather bag and took the private elevator down to the subterranean parking garage. The underground structure was cavernous and dimly lit, echoing with the distant hum of industrial ventilation fans and the steady drip of rainwater from concrete expansion joints. As Maya walked toward the secure transit exit, a heavy black luxury sedan suddenly accelerated down the central lane, cutting across her path and braking sharply 3 feet from where she stood. The rear passenger window rolled down with a smooth electric hum. A man sat in the shadows. Damon Vance stepped out of the vehicle, his tailored black cashmere coat draped over his broad shoulders and a silver signet ring gleaming on his right hand. He was a charismatic, smooth-talking executive who carried himself with the effortless arrogance of someone who believed he was above the law. He closed the car door softly, offering Maya a cold, practiced smile that did not reach his calculating eyes. He blocked her path to the pedestrian exit with deliberate physical menace. "You must be Ms. Maya Holloway," Damon spoke, his voice smooth and laced with false warmth. "Donovan has been keeping you very busy up on 32, digging through dusty papers that belong to a painful chapter we're all trying to move past. My cousin has a tendency to obsess over tragedies he can't control, and I hate to see a hard-working sister like you get caught in the middle of a rich man's delusions." "I am an archival contractor performing authorized compliance audits, Mr. Vance," Maya replied coldly, stepping back 2 paces and keeping her leather bag tucked firmly behind her hip. "If you have questions regarding the scope of my work, you can address them directly to the chairman's office." Damon let out a dry, condescending laugh, stepping forward as he reached inside his overcoat to produce a thick, sealed manila envelope. He tapped the envelope against the palm of his hand, watching Maya's face with predatory intent as he laid out his offer. He believed every person on Earth possessed a price tag that could buy their silence. He was about to learn a very hard lesson. "Inside this envelope is $200,000 in bearer bonds and cashier's checks," Damon whispered, his voice dropping into a sinister murmur. "All you have to do is declare that the 32nd floor records are incomplete due to water damage and hand over that little handwritten ledger you've been carrying around. Take your daughter, move out of that moldy basement on Oak Street, and buy a beautiful brick house in Stonecrest where you don't have to worry about rent ever again. Don't be foolish, Maya. Donovan won't be able to protect you when the real storm hits." Maya looked at the envelope holding $200,000, knowing that the man standing before her had used this exact same brand of corrupt manipulation to destroy Althea Vance. She felt no fear, only a pure searing fury that ignited every fiber of her being. She stood with her spine rigid as iron, her eyes locking onto Damon's face with unyielding contempt. Her soul was not for purchase. "You can take your dirty blood money and choke on it, Damon," Maya said, her voice cutting through the damp garage like a steel blade. "Althea Vance died with her honor intact, and I will see you in federal prison before I let you touch a single page of my work. Get out of my way before I trigger the security alarm on this keycard." Damon's fake smile vanished completely, replaced by a mask of murderous rage as he realized his bribe had utterly failed. He snatched his envelope back, his jaw clenching as he stepped into his sedan and slammed the heavy door shut. The car screeched out of the garage into the Atlanta night, leaving Maya standing alone in the damp concrete bay, with her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew Damon would act immediately to destroy whatever evidence he could reach. She had to move faster than him. Maya did not panic. Instead, she went directly to the secure off-site archive vault on the mezzanine level, pulling every single original paper contract and forged invoice out of the filing cabinets. She packed the master records into 3 reinforced, fireproof aluminum cases, stamping each one with tamper-evident serial seals and notarized chain-of-custody certificates. She transported the cases by bonded courier directly to a secure vault inside the United States Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, where Donovan held a private diplomatic repository. By midnight, every shred of physical evidence was locked behind 10 inches of reinforced titanium. Her instincts proved flawless. At 2:15 a.m. that same night, a catastrophic data wipe occurred across Vance Global Group's primary cloud servers, destroying 15 terabytes of accounting files and security camera logs in a coordinated cyber attack. When Donovan arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m. alongside federal prosecutors from the Southern District of Georgia, the senior IT directors were in complete hysteria, believing the case against Damon had been permanently erased. Damon walked into the executive boardroom, looking smug and victorious, accompanied by 4 high-powered defense attorneys who demanded an immediate halt to all internal investigations. The trap seemed to have sprung. "There is no evidence of financial wrongdoing on any server in this building, Donovan," Damon announced grandly, spreading his hands across the polished boardroom table. "The audit was an unfortunate witch hunt based on the paranoid ramblings of an unqualified temp worker, and I demand an immediate formal apology from the board." The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with authority, and Maya Holloway entered the room flanked by 2 federal marshals carrying the 3 sealed aluminum cases. She walked straight to the head of the conference table, unlatching the first case to reveal stacks of verified, ink-stamped original paper manifests and certified banking records. She pulled out her master handwritten reconciliation ledger, setting it down directly in front of the lead assistant United States attorney. Damon's face turned the color of chalk. "You can delete the cloud, Mr. Vance, but you cannot delete the paper trail signed in your own hand," Maya said, her voice ringing out with absolute clarity and unshakable power. "Every single dollar you stole from the Affordable Housing Fund has been accounted for, verified by serial number, and preserved under federal chain of custody. Your empire of lies is officially over." Federal marshals stepped forward inside the quiet boardroom, their metal handcuffs clicking shut around Damon Vance's wrists with cold, absolute finality. The room remained in stunned silence as the former executive vice president was escorted out of the building, his head hung low beneath the glare of midday sunlight reflecting off the Midtown towers. The physical evidence assembled by Maya proved beyond any reasonable doubt that Damon had systematically embezzled over $31 million, using corporate kickbacks to compromise local officials and orchestrate the tragic highway incident that claimed Althea's life. Justice had arrived at last. 3 weeks later, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and federal prosecutors unsealed a 48-count indictment, charging Damon Vance and 6 conspirators with racketeering, grand larceny, and corporate manslaughter. A public press conference was held on the steps of the municipal courthouse, where Donovan Vance stood before dozens of news cameras to clear his late wife's name once and for all. The local newspapers ran front-page headlines celebrating Althea Vance as a hero who had defended the community's resources until her very last breath. The heavy shroud of unresolved grief had finally lifted from Donovan's chest. Inside the executive offices of Vance Global Group, a special session of the board of directors convened to implement immediate institutional reforms. Donovan took the floor to introduce a resolution appointing Maya Holloway as the corporation's permanent director of data governance and internal compliance, a senior executive role commanding a starting salary of $185,000 per year along with corporate equity. The board voted unanimously in favor of the measure, recognizing that her unmatched diligence and ethical courage had saved the enterprise from total ruin. Maya accepted the appointment with her signature poise and grace. By the beginning of spring, Maya moved out of the cramped basement studio on Oak Street, using her first executive earnings to purchase a sunny three-bedroom brick home in the leafy historic district of Collier Heights. The home featured a spacious fenced backyard with blooming magnolia trees, where Brianna could play safely under the warm Georgia sun. Maya furnished Brianna's new bedroom with a solid oak study desk, a plush reading corner, and shelves filled with hundreds of illustrated books. Her daughter would never have to worry about a meal again. Donovan found his own healing in the quiet laughter that returned to his home, watching Chloe blossom with newfound joy as she spent weekends doing homework with Brianna. He realized that the greatest tribute he could offer Althea's memory was not building more steel high-rises, but lifting up the women in his community who carried burdens identical to those his own mother had shouldered decades ago. Together with Maya, he established the Althea Vance Foundation, endowing $50 million to provide vocational certifications, financial literacy training, and transitional housing grants for resilient single mothers across the Southeast. The foundation transformed thousands of lives. On a bright Saturday morning 6 months after the arrest, Donovan and Maya drove out to West End, bringing Chloe and Brianna back to the Magnolia Oak Diner on Simpson Street. The diner buzzed with the familiar clinking of silverware, the rich scent of chicory coffee, and the warm laughter of neighborhood families enjoying their weekend routines. Miss Bernice greeted them with a wide, affectionate smile, guiding the four of them toward the large picture window booth they now shared as family friends. The room felt full of warmth and light. The table was soon covered with steaming plates of pecan waffles, buttered grits, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit bowls. Brianna sat beside Chloe, carefully slicing her waffles into neat triangles before laughing at a funny drawing Chloe had sketched in her new leather-bound notebook. Maya watched the two girls with deep peace in her heart, realizing how far they had traveled from the cold, desperate morning when she had counted 75 cents in this very room. That journey had started with 5 simple words. Brianna paused, her fork resting on her plate as her eyes drifted across the dining room toward the small corner booth near the kitchen doors. A young black woman in a worn cashier's uniform sat there, holding a restless infant, a single glass of plain tap water, and an unopened menu sitting on the table before her. The young mother's eyes carried that specific guarded exhaustion that Maya recognized immediately. The look of a parent holding onto her pride while trying to make $5 stretch across 4 days. Brianna gently tugged at her mother's navy silk sleeve. "Mommy, they look hungry," Brianna whispered softly, echoing the sacred phrase that had changed their lives forever. Maya looked across the table at Donovan, seeing the same understanding and quiet reverence mirrored in his eyes. Donovan smiled warmly, nodding toward the server while sliding a leather portfolio, holding an Althea Foundation educational grant application across the table. Maya stood up, took Brianna by the hand, and walked together toward the corner booth to welcome another mother out of the cold. The circle of kindness had become unbroken.